Iowa's essentially on autopilot at this point because Kirk Ferentz has a formula that's worked. It's a proven formula. It's a winning formula. And there's really no reason why they need to reinvent the wheel. Now, there's some changes that have been made in the offseason, but at the same time, it's essentially still the same program. When you look at the top 10 players for Iowa, it's easy to see why this is the same team. It is the same from years past. You get a lot of the same positions that are going to be good, and you just kind of know what to expect from them. Number 10, linebacker Jack Campbell. This Iowa team plays super stingy defense. Very underrated team. Seems to be the trend so far. If you're not one of the best teams in college football and you're still amongst that group, or I should say you're not considered one of like the blue bloods and you're still up in the top 25, then you have an underrated group. And guys like Campbell will have a say in how good Iowa is going to be this year. At number 9, cornerback Matt Hankins. Iowa's produced some exciting and some explosive defensive backs over the past few years, and it feels like Hankins is just next up in that lineage really there. And with a guy who has 168 tackles and 16 passes defended in his career, it's easy to see why people might think that he's the next great cornerback for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Number 8, linebacker Seth Benson. Again, linebackers at Iowa know what they're doing. They're smart. They know how to make the right reads. They're just very football savvy. They have high football IQ. They know what they're doing. And while they might not be the most physically talented players, they're going to make a ton of plays because they know what to do. They're disciplined and they make the correct read more often than not. Number 7, Sam Laporta. Now, if a tight end at Iowa being good is surprising, then you don't know the Iowa Hawkeye program. Sam Laporta is the great blend of blocking and pass catching, and he could be the next great tight end for Iowa. It's not really surprising at this point to see a tight end do it, and if you don't see a wide receiver for Iowa, it's because their tight ends are taking most of the attention away from the other guys on the offense. Number 6, Cody Ince. Now, Iowa lost 2 big names in Alaric Jackson and Tristan Wirfs over the last 2 years at tackle, but inside they will be just fine at guard and center. We'll talk about one of those positions later. And if you're going to run the ball like Iowa wants to, you need your offensive line to be good. And while they still have to make sure their tackle positions are reloaded, I don't know if they'll be able to replace what Wirfs and Jackson were able to do, but at least the interior part of their offensive line will be just fine. Number 5, Zach Van Valkenberg, one of the few returning defensive linemen for Iowa this year. A guy who's a second team All Big Ten selection. And like I said, you lose a lot of talent on the line and he becomes the leader all of a sudden. And a guy who really has first team all conference potential. And that's saying a lot given what they just lost. But even though they lose a lot of guys, it's almost like Iowa reloads, not because they have just a ton of talent hanging around, a ton of elite talent, but they do have guys that fit their system, that have been in the program for a while, and they know what they're doing. And guys like Van Valkenburg are going to help them transition into that starting role. Number 4, cornerback Riley Moss, another corner, and we're not done with the secondary yet either, which is scary. Potential shutdown corner, Riley Moss. It's not Randy Moss, but it's the name Moss always sparks a lot of attention because people just hear that name and they start thinking about a couple other big players. Now, Riley Moss might not get to that level, but he has the potential to be a shutdown corner for Iowa if they need him to be, and he would join a long list of players that have been able to do that for Iowa in the past. Number 3, running back Tyler Goodson. as my buddy Thor Nystrom likes to say, spin shady. Tyler Goodson is really slippery in the open field, very difficult to tackle. He was first team All Big Ten with 762 yards and 7 touchdowns last year, and it feels like the backfield is going to open up a little bit for him. He's kind of had to deal with some competition in years past, and now it feels like it's finally his to run, and that might be a good thing for Iowa's offense. It probably will be, just because he's so talented. He's a back that's capable of getting over 1,000 yards. It's just that his own teammates have limited him because the backfield has been so crowded. Number 2, safety Jack Corner. Again, Iowa's secondary, as you can see, loaded again. Probably one of the best in all of college football. And Corner, Moss, and Hankins are going to be a trio that you're going to want to watch when it's all said and done. And the defense, again, will be in good hands with them on the backside. And there's a couple pieces, as you can see, in front of them that will make them not have to worry too much. And they're really going to make life difficult for whoever they face. And at number 1, the most obvious number 1 for Iowa, center Tyler Linderbaum, the former defensive lineman who switched over to offensive line a couple years ago, and really just has thrived since the minute that he stepped on to that side of the ball. And maybe the defensive coaches are kicking themselves for letting him go over there, but it's clearly worked out for Iowa. And he's an all-American talent. He's one of the best linemen in all of college football. And he's going to make sure that this offense gets where it needs to go. Iowa's a team that's consistently overachieved and exceeded expectations, and it's easy to see why they'll do that again this year. Kirk Ferentz, again, has this team on autopilot, and it's an autopilot that gets them to the top of the Big Ten West frequently, at least competing for it, and that means that they have a shot of winning a conference title. Will they do that this year? I'm not sure. There are things like quarterback play that will need to be much improved, but they have the talent to at least have a good core and get them to where they need to go. And it'll be interesting to see how high they can reach in the Big Ten West.